Chapter 12, Newlyweds, New Mindsets, and New Beginnings. After ending the last chapter with our wedding and upcoming honeymoon in Gatlinburg, let's jump right into the life of two newlyweds. If you followed my entire story, it should not surprise you when I tell you how blessed I felt to be married to Julie, my high school sweetheart. We had a cute little ranch house and we went out living our new life together. I continued to work at Pine Cove for Brad, and Julie started her teaching career at a local Catholic school. Our school district only had one opening that year, and Julie decided to get started when she could and where she could. The following year, in the fall of 1992, she was hired by our district as a Title I reading teacher. We had quite a little good thing going, you might say. Compared to the things we have today, well, back then we didn't have much. We spent hours listening to cassettes as we remodeled that little house. We didn't have much to do on it because before we purchased it, a renovation had already been done. We simply painted some walls a new color and added some border paper along the ceiling. The entire house was not air conditioned, so we made do with a simple, affordable window unit. Life was transitioning from living separately with our parents to living together in our new home as newlyweds. There is a difference between a house and a home. A house is what it was before we moved in. We worked daily to try and make it a home. Now that goes for every house, I believe. Just because people eat and sleep there, that doesn't make it a home. Homes take work. People shed tears and laugh in homes. Houses give us a place to sleep and keep us out of the weather. You've probably heard someone say, it's not about the things we own. Life is about who you choose to spend your life with. We were living a grand life for sure in our new home. I'm a blessed man in many ways. I know I keep saying it, but I'm going to keep saying it. I sit here today and I'm writing my last life story. I speak in many different churches and denominations on a regular basis. To be totally transparent, I'm writing this book for many reasons. Sure, I want a basic record of parts of my life to hand down to my family. I also feel that if I share some of those trials and triumphs that I've experienced, more people, well, they might relate to me. Why in the world would I want that? Well, I'm looking to share a part of my story, but also offer stories I've heard on a speaking platform to challenge and encourage others. I'm not looking to kick any doors open, but I'd sure like a few to swing open if that happens. From teens to community groups, I want to help others if I can. I mentioned the church speaking for a reason. When I speak, I believe many people think I was brought up in the church and have always had a belief system and that worldview in place. Well, that's simply not the case. May I explain? If you remember back to the first time I asked Julie out, why couldn't she go? You get a gold star if you remember, because, yeah, she was headed back to church camp. Julie was in church, First Baptist Church to be exact, the one we were married in. She was there every Sunday morning with her family. So if I wanted extra time to spend with her, I needed to be in that church. So sign me up. If I get to sit beside the prettiest girl in school in that church, yeah, I'll be there. So my Sunday mornings of sitting in churches began. I'll be the first to tell you, I was not there for God. I was there for that girl. Honestly, I'd been seeking God for a few years anyway, in my own way. I spent time searching in non-conventional ways, I guess you could say. As you know, I spent more hours in nature than most people did. There was a natural order to things that seemed very clear to me. I didn't know any theology, but I knew the order all around me in nature. The idea that everything around me was accidental or had just progressed over millions of years was just not sufficient for me. I had no intention of finding God in a church. Now I realize that statement may sound strange to some of you, but read it again. This time, after reading it, Plug in a few names in your world that may fit into that category. Go ahead. Plug in the names of people who feel some kind of desire to seek God, but a church building isn't on their places they would ever go look. My guess is, are you ready? Most of them are men. That's another subject completely, but also one of the reasons I love addressing men on their beliefs. That was me. I wasn't mad at God or confused by what the world calls hypocritical Christians. No, I'd been seeing things in the natural world that could not be easily explained away. I was beginning to seek those things. I just happened to be in a church building for a different reason. I'll spend some time later addressing the idea of hypocritical Christians. I will say this much for now. Do they exist? Yes, they do. Does the Bible cover that? Yes, it does. If we abandon our pursuit of Him, of God, of a Lord, by using their behavior as an excuse, will God honor that in us? Well, no, He won't. I had a bad experience getting my driver's license one year. Did I give up on that and just quit driving? I've had great clerks and very rude clerks at stores and gas stations. Did I stop fueling my truck or going into the store? I'm sure you get my point. I guess the question I know is to ask this. Is it really about them? Or is it about something you have to deal with on the inside of yourself? God says it's our hearts. On March 18th, 1991, in a First Baptist Church Sunday school room, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I was baptized a few Sundays later. May I share with you what I remembered most about that Sunday in March? You must remember, Julie and her family had been coming to this church since they arrived in Olney, about 4 years before that. At the end of that service, the pastor asked me to come forward to publicly acknowledge my decision. As the service concluded, it was the custom for the congregation to come up and welcome those who had made their confession. This time it was my turn. As those people all lined up to come forward, I was stunned. I truly was. I still recall the faces of those people and the genuine smiles, hugs, and congratulations they all shared with me. Up until then, I had no idea they even knew who I was. I was just a young man following their sweet girl around. Now I began to see it wasn't that way at all. Some of those people are no longer with us, but I remember their words. I've been waiting for you to do that, they said. I've prayed for you. Welcome to our church family. On and on they went. I had no idea anyone had even noticed me. I had even less of an idea that anyone would even care. Oh, I was wrong. It was the most beautiful wrong any young man could be. Now, on the work side of things, the days were rolling along, and I was loving the life that I had. Working outside has always been healing to me. It has an effect on my soul. That continues right up to today. Learning new things in the landscape world really appealed to me. All the guys I grew up with and once worked with, well, they had moved on. We had new people coming in the landscape industry, and it was booming all around us. Brad started the business at his parents' place. His dad, Bill, worked at GTE with my dad and farmed on the side. There were all kinds of room around the house, the barns, the shed. Add in some shade houses and some hoop houses for the plants. We eventually outgrew all of that. Brad found a location on the opposite end of town. It was a former hub for a local oil business. There were plenty of buildings and enough space to expand. A former oil field office became our new location, and we had enough room left over for a small garden center, too. We had both become licensed by the state to apply pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers, so we began a lawn treatment service. Things were rolling right along, with one little hiccup. What could that be? For as long as I remember, I wanted to own my own business. I wanted that responsibility and potential reward. The past few years had given me a real sense of that, and since Brad and I worked side by side each day, we'd grown close. Remember, he was at my wedding. But I wanted some ownership. I brought it up slowly, and we talked about it often. After a year more of talking, discouragement was a better word to use. In all fairness to him, he didn't have to offer me anything more than a paycheck. That's what I signed up for. But one issue was, I'd helped him build this thing, and I was more than willing to do what I had to justify it. Still, time marched on without any ownership. To say I was disappointed is an understatement. By this time, Brad had also married. Now, his wife, Jane, her father, was an oil man in our area for many years. He'd been very successful. In fact, he had purchased that former oil office and the yard we had moved the business into. All the buildings that we were able to utilize were actually owned by Jane's father. I was as close to those two as anyone. Julie and I even made a trip to Chicago with them to a big yearly trade show. They took us to the nicest restaurant we may ever go to. It was quite a meal, a very nice event, and a memory I will always cherish. All four of us also flew to Baltimore for a trade show out there. Time together was common and always fun. With all the success we were enjoying, it may seem a little odd or even selfish to want partial ownership the way I did. All I can say is, I just did. After more than a year of asking with no results, I looked into getting another job. It wasn't easy, but I decided that was what I needed to do. Now, Walmart had just built a huge distribution facility outside of town. Many men had already gone there to work, and it was quite a place. It was also a significant change to the local workforce and economy. It gave people opportunities that did not exist before they came to town. I went out for an interview and was offered a job on the spot. When I told Brad, it wasn't easy. Also, he really didn't even believe me. I told him I started for Walmart in 2 weeks. He didn't try to get me to stay. He almost begged me. But I also think pride on both our parts concluded our vision of things, and it was clouded in a way that we couldn't overcome. I was not going to break my word to Walmart, and he tried to fill the emptiness of my position with other people. Yes, you could say we were both a little stubborn. When I started with Walmart, Brad didn't give up. Each and every day he came to my house when I got off work. He wasn't going to make me leaving easy. I was flattered, but also exhausted. In my opinion, he had more than a year to make it right, and I truly think he never thought I would leave. But I did. When I told my dad what was going on, I only remember him saying one thing. Now, I wanted him to agree with me and support me. Although he may have done that, here's the one thing I remember him saying, and I remember it well. Son, there's only one thing I've always known about you. Since you were a little boy, you've always been an outside kid. Working in a distribution center is inside work, so I hope you like it. At first, I just wanted to prove to him that I could do it. I loved the pace out there and the physical nature of the work, and I was more than a little put off by some of those corporate rules. I'm not knocking Walmart or any big corporation. There's a reason behind all those rules, whether I see it or not. I just felt tied down, and yes, even the rain pounding down on that warehouse that I could hear made me miss the outdoors. Dad was right, as usual. On one of his visits, Brad told me he and Jane had discussed things. He said Jane told him that he was miserable now and to offer me whatever it took to get me back. I wasn't going to hold his hand over the fire. I only wanted split ownership of the landscape business. I didn't want any of the garden center. That was his thing. We worked things out and I returned. Once again, I was on cloud 9 and running away with life. My beautiful bride, our life together, and work I absolutely loved, and I could devote my life to this. Now this This was truly living. Before I wrap up this chapter with Red as I usually do, because it's a part of my life, I want to cover one other huge event in our marriage and our lives. As you know, I continue to mention that I've always been an outside guy. What else would an outside guy want but to live in a log cabin? Julie and I were doing just fine with our first little home, but we began doing some long-term planning. We were ready after a couple years to start thinking about becoming a family, trying to have a child. With the prayer, hope, and thought of an upcoming child, we decided it might be a good idea to begin looking for a new house to turn into a home and a new location. With all my memories from Carlinville and the country, we desperately wanted to raise any children we might have just outside of town. Like a lot of people, we wanted to be just far enough out of town, but not too far. Now that sounds simple, huh? Yeah, a log cabin, because there are so many of those in southern Illinois. Just outside of town, but not too far out. Easy. Now I knew a local realtor, so I made a call and offered those conditions. I was shocked, and I really mean shocked, when she didn't say that they had one. They had two listed at that time. What? Yeah, you bet we went to take a look at them. Now one was a little further out of town than we were looking for. It was beautiful, though. It had a nice machine shed outside and also a nice price tag that went along with it. It was more than we wanted to spend. But shortly after that, we went to look at location number 2. It was new to the market in our area. It was only on 2 acres, but there was plenty of room all around it. The cabin itself was a little small, but it had the potential to be added to. We may be able to tell by my wording that we made an offer. After the usual back and forth, we bought that cabin in the spring of 1994. What began as a long-term search to find the home we wanted to raise our children in, which we didn't even have yet, it was all over quickly. The memory of the first time I came out here to walk around is very fresh in my mind. It was early spring, there was a chill in the air, and it had been raining off and on all day. As I walked around those 2 acres, I got wet. Julie wasn't there yet, so I was waiting for her to arrive. But man, I couldn't stay in the truck. As I sit today and type and now read these words, I'm sitting in that house, in that cabin. Yes, we still live there over 30 years later. We've had many photos of the visitors that came to see us and offer their support and congratulations on the purchase of our new home. There are times I need to sit long enough to see the favor I've been shown in my life. If you've followed along, it did happen just like that. We were perfectly content and very happy in our first little home. We began to explore our options, and before we could think twice about how fast things were proceeding, bang, we were there. So we had the home we wanted in the place where we wanted it. How about that family we planned? I'll get there in the next chapter, along with a couple of challenges. When I say challenges, I mean life-altering events. So what was going on with Red? If you'd looked at my day-to-day life, Red played less of a role than ever. I was comfortable with all the people I worked with. They'd been around me enough. There were no issues whatsoever. There was, however, one incident with a customer in all the years that I've worked in the public eye. Our little town is known for a family that had been nationally known and put a clinic here in town years ago. The boys in that family were intelligent and well respected. I believe all of them went on to become doctors and had come back to run and develop our local clinic. The girls in that family became nurses and returned as well. As they aged and retired, some remained in the area. Pineco worked for one of the older, retired brothers. Now please remember, he had spent his entire childhood and career around the medical field. I do not hold this incident against him in any way. I didn't at the time, and I don't hold it against him today. He was standing at the end of his drive talking to Brad. I'd been working up by the house and walked out to them. This gentle man saw red and stopped what he was saying to Brad. He pulled my hair back in order to get a better look. He felt what red felt like, and he talked about what it was. I was frozen in place. I had more than my share of glances and stares through the years, but never anything like this. I was embarrassed, yet I understood his curiosity too. I'll never forget that day. I can take you to exactly where we were standing. Occasionally, Julie and I walk by that house and that driveway. There hasn't been a single time in the 30 years since that day when I went by that drive that I didn't think of that encounter, how he pulled my hair back just to see red, to get a better look at something I didn't want anyone to see. Now, you may think that that's not all possible. You may believe that it's a stretch to remember something like that. I would say red does that. Just when I thought it was not a factor. Bang. It still gives me a little sinking feeling inside when I think of the way he stopped talking about his landscaping and began talking about birthmarks. It was just the world I lived in. What seemed to be a normal event or moment in time could change in any moment. Yes, it shaped me. I desperately tried to avoid any bitterness. I wanted to offer compassion to people who had anything given to them that others always saw before they saw them as a person. It's still a significant part of my soul and lifestyle. Red did that too. On to the chapter with events that overlap many of these events. It was the mid to late 1990s. Julie and I were in our log cabin home. She had her teaching career, and I was outside working each day. Yes, we had it very, very good.